We're just months away from the highly anticipated midterm elections, with residents in 36 states also casting their vote for governor. The American Legislative Exchange Council just released its report grading America's 50 governors on economic freedom. Here to talk about the report further is a chief economist and executive vice president of policy at the American Legislative Exchange Council, Jonathan Williams. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me today.
Before we get to the data, tell us what the governor's scorecard is.
It's really a report to help Americans and people across the country a way to measure their governors versus the other 49. There's so many groups out there that rightly look at members of Congress, for instance, and look at their voting record, and that's very important as well at the federal level. But there's very few that try to compile an apples-to-apples comparison of how 50 men and women govern their states, of course, along with their state legislators in those state capitals. And so from a free market, limited government context, which my organization, ALEC, was founded nearly 50 years ago to support, we wanted to give people this perspective to see how their state's being governed.
4 of the top 5 governors are Republican elected leaders, with the exception being Democrat Governor Jared Polis of Colorado. What sort of policies from his tenure led him to be on that top 5 list?
Well, there's a couple of things to point out, and congratulations to Democrat Governor Jared Polis for this ranking. But one is that he is about the only governor from the Democrat side of the aisle that I can remember in my 20 years and being in all 50 states to analyze state policy that has called for not just tax cuts, but the complete elimination of his state's personal income tax. He wants to be more like Texas and Florida and Tennessee and the states that are really growth states, states that are gaining population and jobs from the high tax states. And that's great. Also, Colorado benefits from the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which wasn't a Jared Polis initiative, but that's something that Colorado voters nearly 30 years ago put into its state's constitution to limit the growth of spending to the rate of growth of the economy. Just a common sense reform that, boy, wouldn't we wish Washington could learn something from Taxpayers' Bill of Rights in Colorado.
And interestingly enough, the February unemployment data from the Labor Department revealed Republican-led states outperformed Democrat-led ones with job recovery and unemployment rates. How much did this have an impact on your report?
Well, we absolutely look at things like where people are moving, what's the unemployment rate, what are the job growth numbers by state when we rank the governors in this report. Those are some of the key factors in addition to tax rates and school choice ideas and so many other important policies. But it's really hard to ignore states like South Dakota at number 1 with Kristi Noem, and Utah at number 2 in this report, and Florida at number 3, some of the lowest unemployment rates in the country compared to New Mexico under Michelle Lujan Grisham, who ranked dead last at 50th, has an unemployment rate nearly 3 times the rate of the states at the top of the list. So policies matter, free markets matter, and governors then working with their legislative branches that take the lead and produce policies for hardworking taxpayers isn't just economic theory that we talk about. It actually matters when you look at the job creation numbers you just mentioned.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the number 1 on that list is Kristi Noem. Spencer Cox of Utah, number 2, I believe, and then Governor Ron DeSantis, number 3. I want to get to now the 5 governors on the bottom of the state governors list are all Democrats, but aside from their political affiliation, is there a common theme that led to their poor performance?
Well, nearly all of those governors at the bottom 5 were governors that advocated or in some cases really did enact tax increases on their hardworking taxpayers in recent years. And let's not forget, right now, states have so much money. You hear from so many state policymakers. They say, we have so much money sitting there because of the federal bailout, as well as economic recovery in their states. They don't know how they're going to spend it all. And in addition to the discussion in some of the top-ranked states about how to get that money back to taxpayers through tax cuts, what we're seeing at the bottom end is they're doubling down, trying to grow government, and in some cases even trying to raise taxes, cut off domestic energy production, and so many big government policies that are clearly having an impact on their economies. In the case of Illinois under J.B. Pritzker, he may have been dead last at 50th, but the voters of his state saved him from a massive tax increase on the ballot just recently on personal income that he had advocated for.
And how do these rankings compare to rankings released in October of 2020?
Well, rightly so. The rankings have now shifted away from the really dangerous debate around government lockdowns of the economy and of small businesses and of places of worship, and have really transitioned into more of traditional policy environment now. How do we get people back into the workforce? How do we stop, paying people more to stay home than going back into their jobs, and then taxing them, of course, more when they come back into their jobs? So the labor market issue has been huge. The issue around taxing and spending and how to wisely spend the federal funds by not obligating their taxpayers in the states to all kinds of problems in the years ahead. So more of a traditional policy environment, I think, in the last year as we've turned the corner and exited the worst of the pandemic, let's all hope, and less of the big government lockdowns of the economy.
Exactly. And we know that a lot of those lockdowns, a lot of the Democrat governors, they imposed very harsh lockdowns where, as Kristi Noem, for example, who's #1 of the best rated governor in your report, she actually let the Sturgeon rally go on, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, another one of those who also was highly against those lockdowns, and we can see how that's been having an effect on their report. And lastly, speaking of the report, where can our viewers go to learn more about these rankings?
Well, rankmygovernor.org is a great spot to not only check out our rankings, but rank your governor if you think we got it wrong somehow. And also ALEC.org is a great resource with this and so many other ideas that you can take a look at.
Again, the chief economist at the American Legislative Exchange Council, Jonathan Williams, thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And we'll have more today's top stories for you right after this.